Welcome to the Advanced Sports Analytics Show here on RotoGrinders, brought to you by Jock Market. Stop throwing your money away. It's time to check out Jock Market, the app where daily fantasy becomes a stock exchange. Buy and sell shares of players in real time for real money. Download now for a 100% deposit match up to $50 using the promo code GRINDERS. And get this, if you don't turn a profit this week, Jock Market is running back their first market guarantee to cover your losses this week. So download Jock Market in the App or Play stores or check out jockmarket.com. That's JOCKMKT.com and use the code GRINDERS for a 100% deposit match up to $50 on your first deposit. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka BlenderEd, Blender HD. If you want to follow me there on Twitter, joined by the man behind the numbers and the wheels, the hamster wheels that are they're overdrive this week, because they're going to have to keep on running different things seemingly every hour. It's Stewart Gibson, and back for it's been the longest of time since the beginning of the year. It's Brandon Adams, who you're heading. Are you heading down for the DraftKings live final, or you're staying home?
Well, I live in Miami, and I'm going to the hotel tonight, and gonna grab some drinks with people and pick brains and do all that fun stuff.
Well, it's going to be a very interesting live final slate for you guys down there, because this 11-game slate may turn into a 9-game slate. Right before we're recording, we're looking. I'm scouring Twitter right now that the Seahawks-Rams game is potentially being moved to Tuesday, and so is potentially the Washington and Philadelphia game. The Washington-Philadelphia game is, I think, a little less notable based on the projections and ownerships that I see. But obviously that Rams-Seahawks game is big when it comes to, like, you take that game off the slate and, like, anything you see, like, ownership-wise right now, you might as well just throw out the window. The Rams were going to be one of the top targeted teams on the slate. But another thing about this slate in general, this is the first time I've seen this year that there is no game on this slate that has a 48 total or higher. Brandon, I know you like targeting high total games because they're more correlative to fantasy points, sealing fantasy outcomes. Is there anything that you do on, like, is there a difference? Like, we have the Cardinals as the highest implied team total. Their game is 47.5. The lowest total game is 39.5. But do you change your approach any differently when, if there were one or two games that were at 53 totals, do you just treat the highest total games as the highest total games? Or is the difference between a lot of these games not as dramatic, since 47.5 isn't that dramatically different than 43, but like that's like 6 other games on the slate. So you're more likely to go a little bit off the board or stay targeting these higher total games.
Yeah, I think off the board is probably how I'll go this week. This is a strange week for sure, because as you mentioned, we just got this news about the LA game. Cooper Kupp was going to be pretty popular. But generally speaking, there weren't running backs to pay up for. I would have expected some people to pay up for Najee Harris and Mixon, but they wouldn't have outsized ownership. And other than that, there aren't really attractive high dollar running backs. So it was really a high dollar receiver week. And I think the way everyone is thinking about things now is, that some low dollar running backs are going to come into play, and we just don't know where that is yet. So I'm sort of penciling in 5 to 6K per running back, knowing that maybe it's Jeff Wilson again. Maybe there's going to be some great value at the 5 to 6K. We just don't know quite where it is yet. And there are situations that could develop. We could have defensive players out for COVID becoming relevant for running back. I think basically most people this week, if I were to guess, would be paying down at quarterback, paying down at running back, getting premium wide receivers, tending to get fairly expensive tight ends like Kittle, Knox, Gesicki, and then kind of paying up for defense.
Well, would your approach be to do the opposite? Or I think that with the amount of 5 to 6K running backs that are available, that, I mean, you could still be different enough at running back. The question comes in at wide receiver is that with Cooper Kupp off the slate, potentially, right? I'm kind of half assuming that they're moving this game. So we have Cooper Kupp as the highest owned player on the slate in our current projections. DK Metcalf, very popular because Lockett is out due to COVID, but that he may not. Maybe they play the game and he tests negative and he's able to play. So that may be a wrinkle on Sunday if the game does play then. If you take these guys off the slate, does it just replace Cooper Kupp with, well, people will play Diggs and Adams and Deontay Johnson, Deebo Samuel? I'm not sure as much so, but there's really aren't, like you mentioned, like the no top end running backs, but there aren't that many top end wide receivers in the 7K plus level that with Cooper Kupp gone, don't you think that like that construction is like, where are you going to be different at wide receiver? Or are you worried more about, you don't mind being similar at wide receiver as long as you get some of these cheap running backs right, and there may be 10 to 15 options?
Yeah, it will make a difference with no Kupp. I wasn't really going to pay up for Devontae Adams personally, but I think plenty of people will. Deebo, Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Deontay Johnson, I think they will all be pretty popular. And there are lots of great options, mid-tier wide receivers. The real question is whether pay down or pay up at quarterback, I think. I suspect that these 5 to 6K quarterbacks are likely to put up similar scores to your first tier quarterbacks this week. So I'm inclined to go that way.
So is it to avoid Allen and Kyler Murray?
Yeah. Well, it kind of seems like Allen is maybe a bit hurt and is just playing because they could use the win for wild card survival. I think he'll play the whole game, but you wouldn't necessarily expect a ceiling performance. Maybe I'm wrong about that. And I don't know. I think if they got it up to a 2.5 touchdown lead, they're just going to sort of run the ball and coast. Personally, I don't think I'm going to pay up for him. I'd be more.
What are you going to pay up for? I mean, you're mentioning the cheaper running backs, cheaper quarterbacks. You're not going to have that many options at high end wide receiver. Like, is this the type of slate? I said on the pregame show that with totals that are more bunched together, is it more beneficial or less beneficial? I think it's more to rely heavier on correlation than on trying to get all the one-offs right. Like if there were like multiple 50 plus total games, like, 4 50 plus total games, it's like, well, I'd like to have a piece of all of this. But I don't see like games environments where it's like, oh, I need to have a piece of all of this. Am I much more likely in larger field GPPs to bet on one game going significantly over and just stacking the hell out of that? Just quarterback, 2 wide receivers, wide receiver backup, run back and go like that? Or is this more of the slate where you want to find the one-off players because there just may not be many of them?
Yeah, in general, I would agree with you that it's a correlation week. The issue this week is it's not a great week for run backs. I'll eagerly anticipate your ideas there. But
no, I'm with you. I mean, we have a lot of games that 10-point, 11-point favorites and not that great options on the other side. And it's not even that they're the 10-point plus favorites, is that the projections on the guys on the other side of the ball aren't even that good to begin with. So it's not like a situation. We have a couple where some of these low total teams have like one guy that's like, okay, he's pretty decent. But for the most part, like I've been toying around building lineups. And I found that I've been more likely to play. It's weird to say, especially for me, to play stacks of teams that I don't have the quarterback of. So for instance, if I do play Kyler Murray plus Christian Kirk plus AJ Green, don't run it back with Amon-Ra St. Brown, but then I go to the Cowboys or something. I go to the Bills and I play Beasley and Davis. So it's like I'm playing a Josh Allen stack plus a Kyler Murray stack. I'm only choosing one of the quarterbacks like that and bet on the teams and not be concerned, especially since the opportunity cost, I believe, is going to be lower on this slate because we have lower total games, that I don't mind taking two receivers or a running back and wide receiver from the same team, even if I don't have the quarterback, because I just want to basically find in my lineup, I want the two highest scoring teams in my lineup, because the opportunity cost of like, well, there's going to be an outlier here and an outlier there, I just think is so much lower on the slate with the game environments being, so poor. So like that, to me, I'm more inclined to do that than worry that much about, running it back with someone from the other side of the game.
Yeah, I'm with you there this week. Why don't we experiment with the format, and I'll give you some of the team plays that I'm high on, and you can evaluate them.
Okay, plus and minus, right? But Stewart, overall, because I mean, there's no high total games to go over, so I mean, we're going to go straight into pluses and minuses for this slate. But Stewart, from an overall perspective, I know you've run the numbers with the current 11 games on the slate. What do you think the biggest change would be if we take? I mean, I don't think Washington and Philadelphia is going to change that much, but definitely with the Rams Seahawks game, if that game comes off the slate, like what ends up being like the high percentage? Is it Buffalo? Is it Buffalo and Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll probably get a mix of people splintering in one of two directions. Buffalo figures to be the natural replacement for Los Angeles, just with regards to like the pricing structure of the quarterbacks, the top receiver, and really the double stack option of like, I think Van Jefferson and, I think Beasley or Gabe Davis kind of there feels like a kind of piece for piece replacement between those two stacks. But I could also see people, just gravitating towards a very different build from a pricing standpoint and like going towards Miami. I could see Miami being fairly popular. So yeah, I mean, really, I think just that, Rams ownership in particular, I think, we've got pretty decent ownership on Seattle, but I think most people would be stacking from the Rams side. I mean, I think ownership will condense around the teams that are most popular aside from that Rams stack. We're showing Buffalo and Miami. I mean, I think the Arizona Detroit game could naturally pick up some steam, as it's just the highest total on the slate, and people that are interested in Los Angeles for their total and firepower, or could gravitate towards Arizona Detroit as well. As it stands right now, like we have that game showing up as a huge plus from both sides. Hard to say how that will shift around, following updating for these possible game cancellations.
And we got that news right now. I mean, as we're recording, Adam Schefter's reporting that both those games, Seahawks and Rams, Washington at Eagles, both are now being expected to be rescheduled for Tuesday. So based on DraftKings and FanDuel's, contest rules, some people I see on Twitter are asking, are they still count towards the Sunday slate? Well, in their rules, like any game needs to be completed within 24 hours of the game period, whatever they consider the contest period. So that would be a no, unless they do something special for this, They're most likely, by the time you listen to this, if you go into your app or into the desktop, you'll probably see, red PPD markers on both of these games. So now that there are 9 games on the slate, Stewart, would you consider Arizona at Detroit to be? Now we're talking obviously in comparison to ownership, and we're not sure how ownership's really going to change now with these 2 games off the slate. But you still, even with the slight bump to them, do you have Arizona at Detroit as a plus game?
Yeah, I mean, as of now, look, I tend to have a pretty numbers oriented approach. So, I think my thoughts will solidify after updating the numbers. But one thing I think that is worth noting is, like, one thing I'm looking at just early in these shows and kind of looking at my spreadsheet that we post over the weekend is like, is our preference to seek to be overweight on are the kind of high ROI teams that are appearing in the top 1% of simulations at a outsized proportion, are they teams that are popular that we are suggesting should be more popular, or is it teams that are middling or unpopular that we feel are actually worth a strong look? So as it stands right now, and like in previous weeks, I think we've actually been pretty high on some of the chalkier stacks. Like we've been high on Tampa Bay in recent weeks. They've been fairly chalky, but our numbers have suggested that maybe not chalky enough or not owned enough. As it stands right now, we are fairly low on really the 3 teams or sides that figure to garner the most ownership. That is Miami, Buffalo, and again, these numbers are run assuming Los Angeles is in, showing more preference for some of these middling, even low owned stacks. I do wonder, as that Los Angeles game gets broken up a bit more, if if we project that ownership will kind of scatter evenly across teams, such that the ownership on some of these under-owned or low-owned stacks kind of comes up. Could see that bolstering maybe the viability of some of these high-owned stacks. But if it shakes out where we're working to the assumption that this Los Angeles game will get kind of splintered on some of the higher owned stacks, then could even, I guess, add more viability to some of these under owned stacks. As of right now, though, yeah, Detroit, Arizona looks like a plus to me from really both sides. Detroit is going to get next to no ownership, and we're projecting decent value. Arizona should get a good bit of ownership coming into the show under the assumption of Los Angeles playing. We had them as kind of the 4th most popular stack behind Buffalo, LA, and Miami. We'll be interested to see kind of how that, how our like ROI and top 1% simulation outcomes change, assuming that Arizona gets a good bit more ownership. But yeah, I don't want to say as it stands now, because like you said, the game is canceled, but under the current set of projections and simulation parameters, yeah, we tend to like this game from both sides.
Brandon, being that you kind of cognitive dissonance here in a way, you talk about wanting to spend down at quarterback more often on this slate. Kyler Murray has as high of a ceiling as anyone else, especially with his rushing ability. With the fact that Cooper Kupp is no longer on the slate, do you view Arizona stacks on DraftKings to be plus versus ownership, being that he may have the highest ceiling, but maybe more people gravitate towards this stack? Because if you're not going to play Cooper Kupp and you're not going to play Devontae Adams and you're not going to pay for Najee Harris, like, people are just going to have money to spend at quarterback. And if you're going to spend money at quarterback, it's probably going to be Allen or Kyler. Do you have Arizona as a plus stack? And if you do, would you consider anyone on the Detroit side, being that they're pretty much going unowned?
Yeah, my opinion there is that Kyler and Kirk are both very attractive plays. And I think that simple Kyler to Kirk connection will be very popular. So my inclination would be, if you're playing that game, try to come up with some unique variation. And that's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, whether it's St. Brown coming back or possibly like Kyler to Edmonds to Kirk, or
You don't like AJ Green? AJ Green's not good enough for you?
well, Stewart, do you have the correlations on hand between Kirk and Green and Kirk and Moore and Green?
I don't have it in front of me. I can pull it up in probably 60 seconds. I know historically Kirk Murray have had strong correlation, but I mean, it's somewhat tough because like with Hopkins out of this game, I do think the dynamic shifts a decent bit between how Kyler relates to these different receivers, you know, like Kirk in kind of this slot, like wide receiver 2 role, I think is different from, I guess, what we assume Kirk will be wide receiver 1. So it does feel like a tough week to use like Arizona correlations, just given that it's somewhat of a different roster, different scheme. Players are going to relate to one another in slightly different ways than we usually see.
How comfortable would you feel with the Edmonds Kirk Kyler play?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Edmonds with Kyler makes some degree of sense, given that, you know, like typically Kyler Connor is the combination that I'm, you know, really seeking to avoid, because, you know, that so much of their productivity comes in this goal line, essentially this cannibalistic goal line competition that they have for one another. Looking back to 2019, we've got a positive, kind of middling but positive correlation between Edmonds and Kyler, suggesting that, you know, they might not be quite as competitive to one another as where Connor and Kyler have negative 0.35 correlation, suggesting, you know, not really viable pairs. Let's see, I could pull
What
up.
makes me interested is the 2 games that started the season where Arizona put up high point totals and you had 8 targets and 5 targets for Edmonds. Those
Yeah, sure.
week 2 and week 3, something like, I mean, playing Jacksonville, sort of the type of game you would hope this to be if you play Arizona, kind of a walkover game where Arizona puts up a lot of points. You'd kind of hope that Kirk just does whatever he wants, and it's one of those kind of 6 to 8 reception games for Edmonds where he scores a TD and gets 100 yards. I don't know. And then would you try to do a bring back on that one, or would you just hope that Arizona is productive and leave it at that?
Yeah, so our numbers are, well, we're not projecting great value for the Detroit side, but I don't know. I mean, if you're stacking like a big Kyler, Kirk, Edmonds, or you know, Kyler, Kirk, Moore, Green, or something like that, like I don't see Arizona as being so pass happy the way like Buffalo is, that, you know, they're going to be likely to air the ball out if not pushed a decent bit. And I don't know, you know, with no Hawkinson, with no Swift in the game, like there are a lot of vacated targets available to some of these cheap Detroit receivers. I guess like St. Brown and Reynolds, their price is not as cheap as it, you know, was a couple of weeks ago. But my inclination would be to take a shot on one of these Detroit guys if doing an Arizona stack. Either St. Brown or Reynolds, I think, would probably be the direction I would look at as a bring back option.
So Brandon, other than this game, because I mean, obviously you are interested in this. Stewart has this as a plus. I personally have this as a plus. Of course, this is when I had it with, you know, the Rams on the slate. What's another game that you're targeting that you would consider a plus from an expectation versus ownership perspective?
Well, I like Miami and Jacksonville quite a bit as stacks.
Okay, but I mean, Miami, I think Miami may be the most owned stack that there's so Tua plus Parker plus Gesicki. Maybe you could even have Gaskin in there. You play Tua, Gaskin plus Parker. I mean, I'm assuming that's what you're going for, but I agree with you from an expectation standpoint. My only concern is that I think it's going to be that combination is going to be very heavily owned, and maybe rightfully so. But I think that this Parker ownership at 4,300, I mean, it may get up to 30+%, and I'm never that thrilled to play 30% owned wide receivers on slates. But apparently, I mean, is it a plus from you from expectation, or are you just thinking that the ownership won't be as heavy as I think it will be there?
I think it's a great play all around in expectation, correlation, and ownership is the question. But that exact combo to a Parker Gesicki, I don't know. If there were like
Is Waddle certainly not going to be able to make it back in time, or
Waddle, yeah, that he did. They tend to think that if it's in the week, they won't be cleared until the next week. But Waddle is an interesting case where it was so early that it seems possible, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
He's probably out, but he could possibly be in.
As it stands right now, under the assumption that he's out, we have the Miami game as a pretty strong minus, just given the ownership, which feels, weird because like the Jets are obviously a team that, you want to attack just given how weak they are on defense. But yeah, at the huge ownership, we don't have the strongest grade on Miami. Jordan, do you see this as a plus or minus in any one direction?
I have it as the biggest minus on the entire slate, because I think Miami, especially now with the Rams gone, I think Miami will be the highest owned. I think Miami will be 1. I think Buffalo will be 2, and I think Arizona will be 3. And I think people will get duped into playing like a Michael Carter at 4,700 or a Jamison Crowder at 5,000, like as a run back in these Miami stacks. I mean, from a value perspective, the Dolphin stack is the best on the slate. I'm not saying that they're bad from an expectation standpoint. I'm just expecting them to be very heavily owned. And yeah, you could still play them and get different elsewhere in your lineup. That's perfectly fine. But I think on a slate with so many bunched up totals, I'd rather not be on one of the chalkier stacks. And if I'm going to be on one of the chalkier stacks, I'm going to be on a stack with Josh Allen. I'm going to be a stack with Kyler. I'm going to be on a stack with a quarterback that is more likely to put up 40 points than Tua in my lineup. And then I could get different elsewhere by not playing 7K wide receivers. I could find 5K and 6K wide receivers to play. So to me, it's an ownership thing than anything. I think that the Rams game and the Eagles game being off the slate brings more people to Miami because it's the most obvious cheap stack. The one that I prefer is what Brandon pointed out with the Jaguars. And this is especially true with Carlos Hyde being out. Okay. It's coming from my game theory point of view. I believe James Robinson is going to be one of the highest owned running backs on the slate at 5,400. Urban Meyer ain't there anymore. Okay. So that actually helped that their total actually went up. Right. So that's how bad of a coach he was. I think people will look at the Jacksonville passing attack and think it's a trap. But I don't think that the Jacksonville passing attack versus the Houston Texans is that dramatically worse than Miami's passing attack with the same types of receivers. Why can't I play Lawrence plus Marvin Jones plus James O'Shaughnessy, fill that tight end spot, and then I can go wherever I want. I don't think any of these guys are going to be double-digit owned. And if James Robinson is going to get 20+% ownership, the natural leverage off of James Robinson would be to play the Jacksonville passing game. But also at James Robinson's price, it's 5,400. I have no problem playing Lawrence plus Robinson plus one of the receivers, Chenault or Jones. And in this type of game, garbage versus garbage, playing Brandon Cooks on the other side or David Johnson on the other side. Like, I like attacking when two bad teams play against each other because they're not just bad on offense, they're also bad on defense. And on a slate where we don't have the highest of totals, taking a chance on a lower total 42 type of total game. I mean, I think it's even, it may be the lowest on the slate. Yeah, it's it's about 40 on the slate. Like, if this game goes 52, like, all these pieces are cheap, and like the opportunity cost isn't that bad. Brandon, do you have a similar opinion on this? Because you did mention Jacksonville after Miami.
Yeah, I like Jacksonville and San Francisco. Jacksonville, I think it will be possibly somewhat popular, but people will not have the same stacks because there's so many ways you can go. And I'm not sure what my preference is. I guess you could punt tight ends. There's enough targets there with Shaughnessy. And then just kind of pick your favorite. Treadwell stands out. And then kind of get more premium wide receivers and running backs. So I kind of like that play. I can't decide which one I like more, the Jacksonville play or Garoppolo has been good. He's passing the eye test and the data test, and they have a nice total. So you could be a little different just doing Garoppolo and then pick your combo.
I think you have to play Kittle if you're playing Garoppolo.
Yeah. But it's not completely insane to just pay very highly and do Kittle and Debo. It's a lot for the offense, but it could quite possibly be good. Obviously, Kittle's never going to hurt you at the tight end spot, and you're just banking on them putting up sort of 27 to 30 points.
So Stewart, what are your thoughts on Jacksonville first off?
Yeah, we've got a relatively strong score in them. If we remove Seattle, we liked a good bit, but if we remove Seattle, we see Jacksonville as, a top 5 or so team from a ROI and propensity to appear in the top 1%. All the stuff kind of described, going to be super low ownership, leverage off Robinson, have the good matchup against Houston. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm just looking at kind of the macro parameters. Like, it's a lower total game. The Jags have a lower implied total than Miami, but I think you're making up for that in terms of the dollar pricing on these guys, and also the ownership premium that you're going to be paying on Miami. So yeah, we like Jacksonville a good bit.
My plus, Dallas Cowboys.
Sure.
I think from a median perspective, they don't project that well. From a median perspective, Dak Prescott 6,500. He's in that weird range, right? Most people will be going down in the 5K range or going up to Allen or Murray. Then we got are people are going to be playing Diggs? They're going to be playing Deontay Johnson, that kind of range, and CeeDee Lamb sitting there at 7,400. Amari Cooper 6,400. Like, these guys are not cheap. Dalton Schultz, Michael Gallup. But from a ceiling perspective, the Cowboys have a great ceiling. They're facing the Giants. And the Giants are horrible. And I have no problem even, if this game shoots out or something, with running it back with, Barkley or Shepard or something like that on the other side. But compared to the ownership, the ceiling, because if I try to make these lineups just using the median projection, they don't come out that well. But using the ceiling projections, they come out just as well as San Francisco or something. So pairing Dak with CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz, or I could mix it around. Even Gallup at 5,500. That's a little bit steep. But like I have no problem because I just don't see Dallas getting ownership. I mean, even with the Rams off the slate, even with it now being a 9-game slate, I just think that Buffalo, Arizona, Miami, I mean, I think Jacksonville will be more owned. I think quite possibly Green Bay may be more owned or something like that. And Dallas is sitting there with nearly a 28 implied total. If I get the right guys, who says that Dallas can't put up 40 points this game? So Stewart, do you have Dallas as positive leverage?
Yeah, we have them as the top, top play from kind of a ownership cost correlation and both positive and negative standpoint. So, yeah, I mean, I think everything you said, right? Like they're, a top 5 or so implied total. Aside from Elliott, I think all the guys we're both projecting as single digit ownership. And like, I get it. I mean, I see Dallas as kind of like a Tampa Bay-esque in previous weeks in that they are fairly expensive. There's this perception that there are a lot of mouths to feed. And I don't think it's like an incorrect perception. Like there are, with kind of the 3 receivers all healthy, Pollard being down, I don't see as like hugely significant to kind of the passing work that these receivers are going to get. Yeah, and like it is slightly different. Like Tampa Bay is so pass heavy that it feels more comfortable. But yeah, I mean, just given the slate where there's not really any super high total games or values that are popping in like a huge way, like the goalposts are kind of moved a bit. And yeah, of course there's uncertainty with kind of picking the right 2 guys. I think for small field tournaments, it probably would be difficult to go Dak, Gallup, Amari, and CD all in one lineup, but certainly could do 3 Cowboys if you kind of, I guess. Well, I mean, even Gallup's expensive at 5.5, so maybe looking at Schultz might be one of the only viable kind of 3rd Cowboy receiver options. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, super strong ceiling, not great from a medium perspective. They're I think all those guys are pretty efficiently priced, but yeah, I mean, it's a slate where there's just like not a lot of great games, and this figures to be kind of one of the better ceiling spots on the slate, certainly with LA off. So yeah, I'm right there with you with Dallas. Like them a lot, and yeah, I mean, I'm fine with running back a Giants guy. Like, some of these teams like Buffalo or Tampa Bay or Kansas City that are so pass heavy, I don't really feel like you have to get pressure, I guess, on Kansas City or Tampa Bay or whatever to get them to pass. Dallas, can be kind of slow if they're playing from ahead. So feel like their ceiling is most likely achieved with some opposition from Dallas. So I'm sorry, from the Giants. So yeah, looking at Shepard, looking at Saquon as a bring back, I think makes a good bit of sense in this game.
Brandon, your thoughts on the Cowboys? Do you agree with both of us? Or you think it's too expensive?
First of all, what do we have as the updated Cooper Lamb correlation?
Can pull it up real quick. So dating back to Lamb's rookie season, we've got plus 0.167 over 27 games. So, modestly positive. I mean, I consider that more or less neutral, like, in a 27 game sample, point positive, 0.16 is not super strong, but not, not negative either. Like, just kind of seem to operate more or less independently of one another. Cooper's best game over the last 2 years really came, looks like opening weekend this year against Tampa Bay, where he put up 42, Lamb 26. Yeah, so we've got a small cluster of games where both those guys have kind of combined for 50 plus, even 60 plus fantasy points together, which on a slate like this, I think you'd be perfectly happy getting 60 points out of your double stacked receivers.
Yeah. I think it's probably a good play. I guess if I were to note my hesitations, there are an uncomfortable number of ways you can go in terms of pairings. So you could kind of call the Cowboys right, and of course, very likely get the wrong mix of players. I think it's possible that Dak is injured. I think that incentive-wise, this is the type of year where, as a tiebreaker, you want teams that have a very strong incentive to push. The Cowboys are going to easily win the NFC East. There's no reason to push anyone. The incentive would generally be to slow down once they got a comfortable lead and just sort of eat the clock and not risk your players. I question the ability of the Giants to push back without Daniel Jones. I don't know. So I have a lot of general hesitation with the situations.
That's where the ownership is going there. I mean, I have the same exact hesitations as you. I agree with everything you said, but should that mean that CeeDee Lamb is 4% owned and Amari Cooper is single digit owned and Dak is 5%? Like, yes, compared to the probability of success, like yes, it's lower than these other games, but should it be that low in comparison?
Yeah.
Really, that's the question we're trying to figure out. Because like I could agree with everything that you've said, but there's still a percentage chance that the Dallas Cowboys go out and put up 50 points on Sunday. Just depends on what that probability is and what the field is going to do. And I just feel like the Cowboys are going to be nowhere close, especially at their prices. People are just most rather just going to play other games or play vomit stacks instead of paying up for this type of lineup. That, to me, I'm willing to give it a shot at this. I'm assuming this even with Kupp out and Metcalf out, like none of this Cowboys ownership is really going to move much. I mean, I don't see people clamoring to pay Amari Cooper at 6,400, CeeDee Lamb at 7,400, and Dak Prescott at 6,500, or Dalton Schultz in the tight end spot. It's just like it's a team with a 28 implied total that essentially is going to be single digit owned as a stack. And how do I say no to that?
Yeah, just to be contrary, San Francisco, they are fighting for their life. They have a total that is the same or slightly higher. You can more naturally stack. For sure you're playing Kittle, and you could play Debo and Kittle, or Ayuk and Kittle, probably Debo and Kittle. And then Atlanta is more likely to push back. And you don't really have to stack the other side because, to be honest, whatever Atlanta piece causes them to be competitive is not going to be owned, whether it's Cordell or Gage or Pitts or whatever. Like no one is going to be playing them for the most part. I mean, of course, I'm thinking in terms of the 200-person field, but I think San Francisco for me is preferred, but I'd like to hear the count.
No, I'm with you on that. It just I prefer the Dallas side. Just the San Francisco stacks. It's a weird way of putting it, because San Francisco is more condensed. The stack combination is going to be similar, yet I'm more likely to get a unique combination out of Dallas for the same ownership. That's got a weird. I'm almost arguing for the fact that the Cowboys have a lot of mouths to feed, and that naturally causes people to avoid them more than try to stack different combinations of them. Yet if someone decides on going to San Francisco, like you're pretty much playing Garoppolo +2 of Samuel, Kittle, and Ayuk. And so if I believe that there'll be an equal amount of San Francisco lineups versus an equal amount of Dallas lineups, I think for the same ownership, the combinatorics of the Dallas lineups give that tiebreaker edge of, well, they're going to be, since there are more Cowboys combinations, my Cowboy combination is going to be is going to be less owned as a group compared to the San Francisco one. You're nodding, Stuart. Yeah, I hope you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, it's like if you think Cowboy stacks will account for 10% of the field, but that 10% will be split out by 4 to 5 different combinations. That's, each individual combination is going to be roughly similar to a San Francisco stack that, maybe only accounts for like 2 to 3% of the field, but is probably going to be Garoppolo Kittle or Garoppolo Kittle Debo. I do like we take a pretty algorithmic approach, and I could see Dallas being kind of the pet stack that gets pushed and promoted as the weekend nears. I feel like every weekend there's kind of that one stack that comes in at a bit higher ownership than anticipated, not because of how they're being projected across the industry, but just because there's kind of a bit of a I don't want to say organized. I think people kind of independently come to similar conclusions about some of these teams, and I could see Dallas being that team that gets steamed a bit going into the weekend. But no, we still have them super strong.
Yeah,
Brandon, are there any games on the slate that you're just completely avoiding?
Completely avoiding.
Like we have that Tennessee Pittsburgh game that we haven't mentioned. We also have Cincinnati and Denver. We also have the Green Bay Baltimore game. Like you say, you're not going to probably play Adams. Are you like avoiding that game completely then?
I might play some Devonta Freeman in that game. There are a bunch of games where I'll play like one player. I think like for the Denver game, it's like maybe Mixon. For the Baltimore game, it's like maybe Devonta.
So more of the running backs.
Yeah.
But not necessarily the passing attack.
Yeah.
You're not going to take a shot on Julio Jones?
No Julio Jones for me.
5,400. Maybe he gets there.
That is a good price. But there are a lot of good prices right there. It's Kirk obviously is a far better play, and he'll be popular. I feel like there's a lot of ways to go in the mid range there.
Are there any other games on the slate that we have not talked about that you either have a tidbit plus or minus on?
Well, I would like to explore that Jacksonville game a little bit more. I think, what do we think about James Robinson pros and cons for having him in the stacks?
I think he's going to catch it. He's from what it looks like. I mean, what running backs do they have? I mean,
what's your preference? Like, let's just say James Robinson and Treadwell or Shaughnessy and Treadwell.
I'd rather fill a tight end spot. I think there's enough running backs on this. Like if we go to like all running backs, that the thing that I'm viewing is that like we got running backs to play, like nothing that stands out, but still like James Robinson may be one of the more owned running backs. So like if I have a chance to have a James Robinson dud game, but Trevor Lawrence throws 3 touchdowns, like I want to take advantage of that more so. But James Robinson is still at a price at 5,400. He will catch balls out of the backfield. That if Jacksonville puts up 28 points this game, at 5,400, James Robinson could still have 18 points, 22 points, and be perfectly fine. It's to me, I think you could go in either direction. I see the case in not playing James Robinson in the stack, and I think from an expectation standpoint, he probably makes more sense in the stack. Right? They get a higher value that way. But from a game theory ownership perspective, I think you gain more by having James Robinson fail because the Jacksonville running game fails and all of the touchdowns come via the pass. You want Trevor Lawrence to have a 303 type of game. And I think that happens more so, and that Marvin Jones and Treadwell and Chenault benefit from that more so than James Robinson.
Yeah, I like that. I don't know how many minutes we have, but let's go into running back for a second, if you guys want to.
Sure. What are your thoughts on running back in general?
I think things are likely to change a good bit. There will be some 5K guy that emerges, whether it's Jeff Wilson or what have you. But I think there are some clear great plays at 5 to 6K. You've got like Wilson, Foreman, Robinson, Freeman, Gaskin. Well, Michelle's out now. All sort of good plays 5 to 6K, and then up top it seems to me just Mixon and Harris, and I think both of those players will be pretty popular.
Our stuff really likes Mixon as just a ceiling relative to ownership guy. We see Mixon and Harris as having quite similar ceilings. Harris, I think, will get a good bit more ownership than Mixon. So he's a guy that's really standing out for us at the running back position, and as kind of I'm running through optimals, getting and kind of skewing our projections based on ownership, getting a lot of Mixon in lineups. So like that spot a good bit. But he certainly doesn't feel like, a guy I'd be interested in stacking with Burrow, as were some of these running backs. I will say the kind of preferred running back QB stack options, there are very few on this slate. And I think, I've been trying to do a good bit of this year, like Fournette, Brady, or Eckler, Herbert and stuff. And yeah, I mean, like Barkley is a stackable running back, but I'm just not really interested in playing Mike Glennon. I guess Aaron Jones maybe could be someone that you'd be interested in stacking with Rodgers, but at kind of the expense of price. There's just like not too many of these running backs that I am eager to stack with their quarterbacks on this slate. So I don't know. I know in previous weeks, Jordan, we've talked a bit about ways to differentiate popular stacks with the running backs, but whether it be like LA or Tampa Bay or even like using Swift as a bring back type running back. But yeah, are there any running backs this week that you see as kind of viable stacking considerations, or mostly just thinking about them as one-off plays, or maybe secondary correlations where you're kind of doing running back versus opposing receiver or tight end?
Now, the only two that really stand out to me are James Robinson and Myles Gaskin.
Yeah.
I mean, Tua plus Gaskin plus Gesicki, and you forego Parker, and you hope Parker kind of fails at 30+% ownership. I could see doing a Miami stack that way, maybe, right? But I mean, I do not think this is a good running back week. It just so happens that we have a lot of like Matt running backs in the same range, and nothing. I mean, I'm not excited about playing any of these guys, and anyone. Truthfully, at the wide receiver position, I'm not excited about playing any of them. I'm not excited about playing the slate. It's a 9-game slate. Nothing stands out as like I'm not that thrilled about playing, but it is the fantasy playoffs. Even though we got games being moved and everything. And Brandon, you're down in Miami, so you'll good. I could wish you good luck because I'm not in the contest. I always have a pet peeve about wishing people good luck when I'm in the contest with them, because I don't want them to have good luck.
What about cheap running backs? Who are your favorite cheap running backs? Like 4,500 to 5,500.
I have no idea. I go by the numbers. Whatever fits in my lineups. I don't know. I mean, we don't even know who's going to play at this point.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, the guys that stick out to me are James Robinson, Eli Mitchell, Myles Gaskin, David Johnson. I mean, look at who we're talking about. Like, that doesn't sound all that appealing. I mean, none of these guys sound that appealing. Deonta Foreman, 6,200. How do you do that? And some of these guys aren't even on the slate anymore. Because I would have said like Darrell Henderson maybe, but I mean, it's whatever fit. I mean, it's not stack related. It's just going to be whatever running backs fit in my lineups. That's typically who I play. I just spread them out. Like, I'm more likely on this slate to be, play 4 stacks, 4 teams, And then my running back positions, I'm more inclined to play 4 wide receiver lineups on the slate, way more than anything else. And just the 2 running back slots are just whatever fits, set a cap on like 20% and go, I don't want more than 1 out of 5 of my lineups to have this guy in it. And just whatever fits, whatever fits. I know that's not actionable strategy, but nothing stands out to me. So it's like any one of these guys could get you there. I'm not convinced that there's going to be any running back on the slate that has 25 points at all to begin with. So at that point, what just rotate them in and hopefully you get the right combination.
Yeah, I think on some weeks where there's been far better running back value, like I think it was probably pretty sharp to say like maybe lock in Sony Michel or, only restrict your running back pool to like 2 or 3 of, 5 or 6 guys. And like, I don't know, this week, probably not going to put any sort of optimizer restrictions on running back, just let it, like you said, let it fill how kind of the numbers see fit. Yeah, it's
And just as long as you don't vomit at the output, because you'll look and you go, okay, I guess I'm running with this lineup with Chuba Hubbard in it. I mean, well, what makes him any better than Zeke Elliott or Javonte Williams or any like the running back position is mostly efficiently priced. So like whatever fills in. But Stewart, you'll have I'm assuming you're gonna have to whatever you planned for the Substack, you're gonna have to rewrite.
Yeah.
Or right after the show.
Well, I haven't, I just the way the week was shaping out, there's no way I was going to do this today. I'm going to let some of the stuff play out. I also have to catch up on what I have missed in the last like hour or two. Yeah, we'll put it out tomorrow. I think that should be the best way to do it because I just don't want to be writing it Sunday morning, but we'll try to do an update Sunday morning, at least on like the table and simulations. Cause man, I just expect a handful of these guys to, and even like some of these guys that are on the COVID list, I could see some of them, surprised getting ruled back in. So yeah, we'll try, and that stuff is significant. Certainly if the player themselves is significant, like, if Waddle gets ruled back in, I feel like that kind of can change the dynamic of how we're thinking about Miami, all of a sudden. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I'll kind of get something out tomorrow with the state of things as of Friday night, Saturday morning, and then yeah, we'll try to do a final run Sunday morning. Probably not rewrite the article, but at the very least update the table and yeah, try to tweet it out with some basic notes about what has changed if things get shaken up in a significant way, which seems likely.
And you can follow the Advanced Sports Analytics account, AS Analytics DFS on Twitter. Brandon, good luck in the final. What's first place? 2.5 million?
2.5, yeah.
Okay, how many? You got 200 competitors?
It's been very much not my type of season. I don't know. It would seem, since we think about things somewhat similarly, it would not have been your type of season either. So I'm hoping for massive reversion to my way of thinking this week. We'll see how that goes.
How many entries do you got in there? 1, 2, 3?
3. I got them all relatively early, and yeah, 3.
3 shots at a 200. That's not that bad.
It's not bad.
So I guess we're rooting for the Jaguars, the Dolphins, and the 49ers.
Well, I find in these things you have to like not go out Saturday night and trust your last minute judgment calls and be prepared to throw your beloved lineups in the trash. So I think that's going to be my approach this week.
Right, just last minute, right 10 minutes before lock. Also, you may be forced to do that. We may have people on the inactives report that are actually active that we thought weren't going to be active, right? Or people that are on the inactives that actually test positive for COVID and can't play 90 minutes to the game.
Yeah, and these things, you always have your sweats and your anti-sweats. Your primary anti-sweat is all of the lineups that you pivoted off of that you have written down. You're like, please don't smash.
Okay, well, we'll check on what happens over the weekend. And obviously, we have games games on weekdays now. Next week, I have a bunch of showdowns, 2-game slates. But we'll be back next week to go over the next Sunday slate, assuming that football is being played. Right, this may be the last time you ever watch NFL football again. The world is coming to an end yet again. But until next time, this has been the Advanced Sports Analytics Show here on RotoGrinders.com.